Hello, viewers of Double America TV. This is Austin, and you are watching Voice of People, Manipur Burning. Manipur எரிகிறது மக்கள் குரல். In this program, Manipur Burning, Voice of People, so we bring different prominent personalities, different concerned citizens, and hear their perspective, hear their views on Manipur violence, and Manipur genocide. Today, we have Mr. Raju Rajagopal from Berkeley, California. He's a very, very well-known Indian American here and across the globe. He's known for his human rights and civil rights activities. He's the co-founder of Hindus4HumanRights. There is always a confusion, Hindu versus Hindutva. Let us talk to Mr. Raju Rajagopal and get to know his perspective and also get to know about his organization.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to talk to you and to our Tamil brothers and sisters. You asked a question about Hinduism versus Hindutva. The differences are indeed very profound. In their own words, it's profound. But what has been happening in recent times is there's a deliberate effort to conflate the two, as though Hindutva itself is genuine Hinduism. And this we strongly oppose. In fact, one of our founding principles is to oppose the Hindutva ideology, which basically says India is a place for Hindus only, and everyone else that lives in India, has lived for generations, will have to take the role of a second-class citizen. That's been amply clear going back 90 years, what that Hindutva ideology means to the minorities. So there is indeed a profound difference, and we continue to educate our own community about what those differences are and push back against efforts to make it appear as though Hindutva is genuine Hinduism. So there's plenty of evidence for that. We had a conference last year talking about the differences. But they will continue to push their agenda mainly because they have the resources to do that. So in our own way, Hindus4HumanRights is dedicated to making that distinction clear through op-eds, through webinars we organize, and so forth. So I'll leave it at that, but I'll be happy to further elaborate on that with specific examples if you wish.
Thank you, Mr. Raju Rajagopal. But welcome to our show. And very happy, you opened with Hindu versus Hindutva. And the Hindus for Human Rights, your organization, doing a lot of activities. Could you just tell our viewers, so what was the purpose and the mission of your organization and what activities your Hindus4HumanRights does?
Yeah, we were formed in 2019. I've been an activist for over 30 years. I was very involved in the aftermath of the Gujarat pogroms in 2002. But never did I think that what happened in Gujarat would become a model for all over India. They threatened to do that in 2003, but many of us didn't believe it, that Gujarat would be a laboratory for the rest of the country. In 2014, when Prime Minister Modi, BJP, came to power, there was still hope among many that all the communal divisions were primarily for winning the election. And once they came to power with a significant majority, that they would focus on the business of the nation, employment, economy, those kinds of things. Unfortunately, second half of that particular term indicated that was not to happen, because I think the BJP, Modi, Shah owed a great deal to their mentors, RSS and VHP. So in 2019 election, they won with an even larger plurality. It became clear to me that they would be acting on many of the promises they had made, including Ayodhya, including Uniform Civil Code, and many other things. So that's when we formed Hindus4HumanRights, 2019. Why Hindus4HumanRights? A lot of people ask, why not Indians for human rights, humanity for human rights? Our answer was very clear. One of the reasons why the BJP and VHP are where they are today in a preeminent position is because Hindus for a long time refused to speak as Hindus. They would speak as atheists. They would speak as I was born a Hindu. And what they did basically is leave a huge, huge vacuum in the civil space, in the interfaith spaces, for BJP and VHP to speak as if they were speaking for all the Hindus. I feel it was a very strategic error on the part of all of us not to have occupied some of that space. So what we're doing is trying to reclaim some of those spaces where Hindus of progressive values ought to have been there. And we've been very successful in that. But our objective is still the same as Amnesty International or Tamil groups or whoever it is, basically to fight for civil rights, human rights, religious freedom of all the people in India. So the objectives are the same, but the way we are approaching it is we must speak as Hindus, point out that within own Hindu tradition, there have been people opposed to caste as early as the 12th century, people like Basavanna and others. So we want to draw on those examples of progressive Hinduism to impress upon the Hindu community that what's happening is by no means the voice of Hindus. So that's a quick summary of why we are where we are. We have now occupied spaces in congressional spaces. People are beginning to respect us as an alternative progressive voice of Hindus. We are in many, many interfaith spaces in the country where people are suddenly beginning to realize how organizations like Hindu American Foundation and others did seem to them to represent the progressive Hinduism that they thought they understood. But now they can see the contrast. So that is where we are. Two basic objectives: oppose Hindutva and support all efforts to end caste discrimination, both in the US and in India. So we are actively following the lead of our Dalit brothers and sisters in California, for example, where there is a law that's being considered to ban caste discrimination. So we're putting all of our energies in supporting that. So once that passes here, it'll become a model not only in other states, but our hope is that will really, really energize people in India who have been fighting for centuries against caste discrimination in some small way. So that's a kind of an overall summary of where we are and why we are where we are.
Thank you so much. You very well summarized, what is Hindus for Hindutva. You also said like Hindus refuse to identify themselves as Hindus when they are progressive or when they oppose oppression and Hindutva. And thank you so much, to inform our viewers about your association or organization. And now let's go to Manipur. So there are a lot of protests against Manipur genocide and violence, and protests. I saw that you participated in a protest in Fremont, and there were protests. Earlier in the Bay Area, protests in New Jersey, protests in Boston, protests in Chicago, protests in Australia, many countries. Yeah. So the question I want to ask is, this Manipur violence, is it like a riot between two tribal groups, or is a ethnic cleansing of a tribal group, or is a structured genocide of Christians or Christian tribals?
Well, I've never been to Manipur, and my knowledge of the history is somewhat limited. But from what I have gathered and read, I think it's a combination of all of the factors that you mentioned. Ethnic rivalry that has existed for a long time, resentment that a large part of the resources in the state are being dedicated to the people in the plains, and very little being spent on people in the hills. So there is economic resentment. And to me, we have such resentments in many, many parts of the country, historical resentment. But for these resentments to rapidly become a state of civil war doesn't happen accidentally. So when a government in the state and at the central government, in a metaphorically speaking, light a match and throw it in these incendiary environment and then walk away as if they had nothing to do with it, it is really tragic. It's really tragic. You cannot blame either side in Manipur. Reality is what it is, but there has been a relative peace for the last 70 years. And why is it breaking out now? I feel the large part of the responsibility is to do with the either ill-considered policies of the government or deliberately conceived policies of the government to set these two groups against one another, to create a civil war, and then to keep quiet about it for over 90 days. And then when finally pushed to say something, to say that, oh, this happens everywhere, it's the height of irresponsibility. I think the government in India is really neglecting its constitutional duties to protect people's lives and liberty in Manipur. And so, to answer specifically your question, is it rivalry between two communities? Is it religious rivalry? Is it generally a reflection
Ethnic cleansing of a
government
tribal
attitude?
group?
Yeah. So all of these things together, but to me, the main cause of why we are where we are is either ill-considered or a deliberate policy of the Modi government, supported, of course, followed by the local BJP government.
So thank you so much, So now, for the 90 days, the state government and the central government, both are BJP government, they are being silent. So people, the question, like people started asking, like it's not just Manipur alone. So there are a lot of threat to the indigenous people in many parts of the country. Is that silence, or is there policies anything to do with the mineral wealth in that area?
I think so. I think if you look at what's happened in Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand, you know there have been efforts by the governments, successive governments, to gut the Forest Act, which had given back some of the rights of the indigenous communities to the forests in terms of forest produce. There's been an effort to not only gut that act, but also to make an effort to say that many of the people living in the hills don't belong there. They cannot prove the land belongs to them, and to expel them from their ancestral homes. Why would any government want to do that? The only explanation is they covet that land and the mineral beneath it. And this is what many activists have been fighting, including, some of the activists who were arrested under the Bhima Koregaon case. Father Stan Swami, for example, has been fighting for tribal rights for a long time and been taking on some of the corporates who want to exploit minerals. So there's plenty of evidence in other parts of India where the effort to displace indigenous people is motivated by the idea. And I think I had a sign the other day in the protest saying, which comes from the Iraqi war, where they used to say, how did my oil get under their feet? Justifying that somehow the oil belongs to the West while the Arabs live on top of it. I think it's very similar. How did my minerals get under their feet seems to be what the oligarchs, friends of Modi, are asking, as if mineral belongs to them. And if it means displacing the Adivasis and destroying their homes, so be it, because this is for the larger national good, as they would say. So I think what is happening in Manipur is very similar in that sense compared to Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh as far as minerals go. But the additional factor, of course, is the historical rivalry between communities.
Thank you so much. So do you see, the silence of the state and central government and the violence or the genocide, people call it, it has a risk of spreading to other parts of India, other part of the country?
I hope not. I hope not, because the worst thing that can happen if for one part of violence in one part of this country immediately spreads to other parts, it'll come to a question of nobody can then say who started it, who lighted the fire. And that is a sure formula for a genocide, larger genocide. And I sure hope it doesn't happen. But on the other hand, I think in many ways, the policy of the government seems to be that they can trigger violence wherever and whenever they want to, which they've proven. But they also seem to think they can stop the violence whenever and wherever they want to. And I think they're wrong in the latter assumption that they can contain violence once it gets out of hand. And that is what's happening in Manipur. They may have thought at some point that they could contain the violence, but they made no effort to do so. So I hope it doesn't spread. But I also hope that they don't reinvent the causes of what's happening in Manipur, which they're masters at with BJP IT cell, coming up with what about tree. And you just saw the Chief Justice's comments about what about tree. Don't use what's happening in other parts of the country as an excuse to justify what's happening in Manipur. That kind of what about tree comes naturally to BJP and RSS, and we must all fight against that, saying violence against anybody, anywhere is unacceptable. The silence of the government, which has constitutional duties not to do something about it, is not acceptable at any time.
Thank you, Mr. Raju Rajagopal. We also hope, it doesn't spread anywhere. My question is, let us switch gear to come to US. So now there are a lot of Indian American associations, progressive organizations, individuals. So we protest and we do a lot of demonstration. There are demonstrations, in various parts. And a human rights activist and journalist, Mr. Peter Friedrich, he has been fasting for the last 8 days. And his demand is, like in European Parliament, they talked about Manipur. And the UK Parliament, they made a resolution about Manipur, and Australia Parliament, they talked about Manipur. But he demands Representative Rohanna to take on the floor and discuss this issue. As the 8th day, he's fasting. There are a lot of other friends, who support this cause in solidarity. They are fasting. But the Representative Rohanna is being silent. He's not engaging. So how do you see that?
Yeah, first of all, Peter is a good friend of mine, a good soul. He's been fighting the fight that many of us ought to be fighting. So I think we should all thank him for the risk that he takes with his own safety in doing what he's doing. I've been more or less in touch with, Rokanna ever since Hindus4HumanRights got created. We've been in touch with actually all three, except for Amy Barra. We've been in touch with Raja Krishnamurthy, Rokanna, and Pramila Jaipal, with the thought that as Indian Americans elected to the Congress, that they would take a lead role in defending Indian democracy and speaking out against human rights. Unfortunately, it became very clear to us very early. I've had many conversations with Raja Krishnamurthy that he's not the one that's going to take that position because he has been funded, as reported, by many of the RSS groups and individuals. And I made even one desperate attempt to convince him that he's on the wrong pathway by actually traveling to DC to meet with him, and went through the whole thing about how, by his silence and support for RSS and others, he may actually be not only emboldening the Modi policies, but he may be preventing other Congress people who would want to speak out from speaking out, because when they don't see an Indian American congressperson speaking out, why should they take the risk? So the silence of the Indian American congressperson is more than just their own silence. It is that actually they're making other Congress people remain silent. With Rokanna, we had hoped, based on some of his tweets in the last 2-3 years against Hindutva, that he would be the one that would do what we were expecting Raja Krishnamurthy to do, which is to stand up against Modi policies. Unfortunately, again, based on the recent actions by Rokanna, it looks like he's not going to take a visible, strong stand against what's happening in India. And this is worse than, in my view, it's somewhat worse than Raja Krishnamurthy, where he was very clear about where he stood. Whereas in Rokanna's case, he gave the impression that he's using his grandfather's experience and his tweets that he would do something. He has refused to do that, despite a lot of pressure in the recent days and protests and hunger strikes. And yesterday in the town hall meeting, he pretty much ignored Peter's questions about Manipur and kept talking about Indo-American relationship. Now, nobody is against strengthening Indian-American relationship, least of all me, but that cannot come at the cost of democracy in India. And this has to be made clear to Rokanna. And it's not that, and he's talked about the fact that the Congress is not in session right now, and when it comes back in September, he'll make some sort of a statement on Manipur. It's very callous when people are dying every day for a Congressperson to say, oh, just wait until I come back to the Congress in September, then I may or may not make a statement on Manipur. He could have yesterday, for example, in response to Peter, clearly stated, this is where I stand on Manipur. I'll elaborate on it, but he's refused to do that. And another reason he's using that is, oh, I'm going to India with a congressional delegation. Makes no sense to me that he wouldn't want to listen to people that are defending human rights in India before he goes. What's the point in talking to us after he comes back? So very disappointed. Hope he will change his mind. But I'm very skeptical that it'll happen in the larger scheme of things. He's aiming for something larger in the political sphere, and I don't think he wants to alienate Modi in any way in that pursuit.
Thank you for clarifying. So can we take it? His ignorance, he is ignoring Peter's question, being silent, and saying that when I come back from India in September, make a statement. So he is also kind of leaning towards Hindutva, or he is also funded by RSS and Hindutva.
That last part, I'm not sure. I can't vouch for that. I know some of his donors who are genuinely as concerned as I am. Perhaps they're as disappointed as I am. I'm not a donor, by the way. But I think they will have to sort it out with Rokanna. If other donors who are interested in defending Indian democracy are concerned, they ought to talk to him before he goes to India, because we don't want him to meet people that are primarily associated with the BJP and the RSS, and maybe make a token meeting with a couple of rights activists and come back and claim that he spoke to all factions of Indian civil society. We need to stop that. And more than anything else, my concern is that the House India Caucus does not become a rubber stamp for Modi's policies. And that would be a huge disservice to the Indian American community, because by its very name, it's supposed to represent all of us, not just some of us.
Very, very well said. The House India Caucus shouldn't become a rubber stamp for Modi's policies. And, the demand is very clear, right? So Rokanna has to make a statement and before he goes to India. So that's a demand of most of the Indian American who support this protests or who are against this genocide in Manipur.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So considering time, I just wanted to come to the last question. So what could be the possible solution to this violence and suffering? That's one. The second part is, what are the actions the people, the Indian American in US or across the globe, the Indian diaspora need to take to end this violence?
Yeah, I think first is we need to work against denial of violence. Like all human beings, I think when we are exposed to real facts on what's happening in terms of violence, we tend to say, oh, this cannot happen. But when those visuals are kept away from you, which is what the Indian government is doing with its massive influence over social media giants. They're manipulating news and not even bringing the message to the larger community because they know people will react as human beings, not as BJP supporters. So we have to, we are in the Silicon Valley here. And one of the things that I feel we need to have a stronger action on is to call out the social media companies here, Twitter, Meta, including employees who are maybe on our side, to not become digital dictators, as I call it. They are dictating policy to the rest of the world through their digital prowess. In this case, they seem to be colluding with the Indian government. So that's one thing we can do as Indian Americans here. Second, as far as Hindus for Human Rights is concerned, we are making every effort to reach out to Hindu community, which is not an easy thing to do because plurality of them probably support Modi. But we can't stop doing it. So we are doing engagements like Desh Videsh conversations, where inviting opponents and supporters to come into the same room so we can recognize each other's humanity, not demonize each other behind a computer. So we're making small efforts in that direction. I had a debate, for example, with a HAF supporter on SB 403 on live TV. We need to do more of that. And I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to engage in a debate with HAF or anybody else. That is the only way we are going to try and change the minds of the larger Hindu community. And Manipur gives us an opportunity to show beyond any proof what is happening and ask ourselves and ask the Hindu community, do you think these things represent the values of Hinduism? If not, what are you going to do about it? So this is where our work is, to reach out to the Indian American community, particularly to the Hindu American community, to ask themselves what their values are. How did they grow up in India? If India could survive with pluralism for 75 years, what is the justification now for supporting Hindu Rashtra, which others 200 million people? Can India survive with that kind of an attitude? So those are the things we're doing. But on the policy front, going back to Rokanna and Raja Krishnamurthy, we have to abandon, except for Pramila Jaipal, who's been very forthcoming. And unfortunately, every time she has gone out on a limb to support causes about democracy, she has been attacked and trolled incessantly. And we need to support her more so that at least one congressperson there who shares our values. But beyond that, we need to abandon any hope that other Indian American congressmen are on our side. In fact, they're stopping other people from speaking up. So we must boldly go to Republicans or Democrats, whoever, who share the values of Indian democracy and ask them to speak up. So that would where I would change our approach in terms of the policy front. So those are the kinds of things I think we need to do. Our work is cut out here, especially before the 2024 elections in India. We're not for any particular party as a 501c3 organization, but we are also very conscious that if 2024 results in even a bigger victory for BJP, our ability to make change will be severely, severely reduced. And we'll just have to wait after that for a natural progression of things, maybe even one full generation for people to wake up and change things. But I hope 2024 will actually show that many Indians do care, are watching what's happening, and will exercise their franchise against Hindutva.
Thank you so much, sir. I mean, very well said, right? So 2024 election is at stake, and we need to have a dialogue with, everyone, like all the stakeholders. So thank you so much for, joining our program. This Voice of People, where people come and share their voice about Manipur violence. We wish good luck with your all the activities Hindus for Human Rights does, and we will also share your organization link in our program descriptions so that other people can join and support your activities as well.
Thank you, everyone, and for this opportunity to share what we at Hindus for Human Rights feel about what's happening in India, especially in Manipur, and hope that we can continue this engagement with the Tamil community.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, Mr. Raju Rajagopal, co-founder of Hindus for Human Rights. Hello, viewers. We heard from Raju Rajagopal, co-founder of Hindus for Human Rights. You can find his organization link in the description of this video. You find in different social media platforms. And Voice of People is bringing prominent personalities to share their views. Today, he touched on Hindu versus Hinduism and the need of the hour to have a dialogue with various people around. The people having opposing views, people who have who agreeing with our views. We need to bring them together and have a dialogue. If you see this video, please do share this video with your friends, your groups, post on social media. And if you are someone else, willing to come and talk about Manipur issues on this program, Manipur Burning, Voice of People, please do contact Tamil America TV, tamilamericatv.com, or through email admin@tamilamericatv.com. I would be much happy to provide an opportunity for you to come and talk to our viewers about your perspectives and your views. Once again, thank you, and looking forward to meet you all again with another guest. உங்களிடமிருந்து விடைபெறுவது உங்கள் ஆஸ்டின். நன்றி, வணக்கம்.